Hey now. So are you paranoid as a prepper? Got this question a couple of days ago, and we're going to chat about it here this morning on Prepper Nation. Welcome to Prepper Nation on this chilly morning. I am John. Thank you very much for watching, for hitting the thumbs up or the thumbs down, whatever tickles your fancy, son, and for subscribing to the channel, the platform. Really helps all of us out, and I truly appreciate it. Also, Eric Jepson, thank you, brother, for sponsoring this morning's Cup of Joe. I appreciate that, but not Joe Biden. I don't appreciate him so much. So let's talk about paranoia this morning. Again, I got this question a couple of days back from a Beaverine, and this person, their spouse is not on board with prepping. And the comment was made that their spouse believes that they are just paranoid. Excuse me, a paranoid individual. You're prepping just because you're afraid and you're paranoid. So I said, I want to address that this morning because maybe this person is not the only person out there that's ever had that conversation with the spouse or maybe a boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever the case may be, a live-in, as I've also heard it called. Um, I think that this is partially true. I think there's some paranoia for sure in the prepping community, um, but not necessarily in a bad way. I think that paranoia exists because we're awake, because we can see things that are happening and that are playing out in the news. We can see distractions maybe where other people I don't wanna call them zombies because they're not all zombies, but many of them are, right? Where they just they don't see it taking place. They think that it's cut and dry in Ukraine. They think it's cut and dry at the border. All of this stuff is cut and dry, and whatever their TV tells them, that's what they believe. So we see things that others just don't see, in my opinion. So when you get right down to it, most people never question anything important. I mean, they just don't. They're told things in school at an early age, even, and they never question that again. They never ask any sort of questions. They'll see the headline on a newspaper and they'll see the story and they'll take it as gospel and believe it wholeheartedly. They never look at things with a critical eye, and I think most preppers, yeah, we've got a few questions, I certainly do, about a lot of things. I got a lot of questions still yet on 9/11. Huge topic, I'm not gonna get into it, but yeah, we've got questions on things, but I think this is a good thing as a prepper, okay? Now, like anything, you can take it too far. The paranoia can get out of control if you allow it to, and you don't want this stuff to consume your life. But a little paranoia, I look at that as an asset. Again, you're questioning things. Gut feelings, to my experience, usually do not lie. If people may look at you again and say that you're being just extremely paranoid, but if your family wants to go to a crowded place, a festival or a mall, and you just have a really, really, really bad gut feeling about it, are you really a bad person for saying, you know what, let's find something else to do? I just got a bad feeling about this. Again, you don't want to have those kind of gut feelings every weekend and jack up your family's plans all of the time. It can get out of control, but a little bit here and there, I think, again, is an asset. A little paranoia leads to situational awareness. Seriously, before my wife was on board with prepping, and some of it was the anxiety, but I would go to a crowded place, and I still do this. Um, and I'm sitting in a corner, or I'm sitting with the crowd in front of me, And my wife used to not understand this. She used to think I was crazy. And maybe I am, but to me, this is situational awareness. If something is going to take place, I would prefer it take place where I can see it from afar and not right behind me or something like that and be just a complete victim there. If I go into a mall or a crowded place, I know where the exits are at. I'm one of those weirdos. So I think a little paranoia is a good thing. It helps you stay prepared. Okay. But again, too much is a bad thing. It shouldn't consume your life. It should not be 24/7. Again, I have questions about 9/11 for sure, and many other things. But I'm not gonna sit here 24 hours a day and study it and deep dive it and stuff because at some point it would take over. There are many rabbit holes out there that will take over if you allow them to. So you don't wanna be one of those individuals, in my opinion. You don't wanna get to a point where it's fracturing a marriage, okay? To my experience, and I'm not a marriage counselor, therapist, son, whatever they're called, but marriage is give and take. You know, even if my wife was not on board right now, I would still be prepping. I would still be a little paranoid, using situational awareness and stuff like this. And I would expect her to be cool with that, because this is my thing. She has her own quirks and her own things. So it's about give and take. You should never be in a situation where your spouse just forbids you to be prepared. You should have questions at that point. So I'm just gonna leave that there. So what are we being prepared about exactly? Um, the urbansurvivalsite.com, it's a website. They posted a list a few days back, and it's titled, and I quote, Top 10 Major Disasters You're Most Likely to Face in Your Lifetime. So it's a list of 10 things that they believe, are most likely to happen. And these are the 10 things that they believe you should be preparing for as preppers. I'm going to go down the list. I'm going to tell you what I agree with and why, what I disagree with and why. And I encourage you to throw it in the chat or the replay comments if you so choose. So starting with number 10, World War III. Um, I would have this much higher than 10. That's my only complaint here. It deserves to be on the list, but I think we've got one foot in it already, and we're heading for a point where we're going to have both feet in it and no way out. The situation in Europe, it's like quicksand. The more we get involved, the more likelihood there is that we're going to get sucked straight into it without an exit or something like that. So I would have it much higher on the list than number 10. They've got EMP as number 9. And this is one that I do disagree with. EMPs for me are like nukes. I had several comments. We were talking about nukes last week. Let me just touch on this. People said, why in the world would they send EMPs and then nukes behind that? What's the logic there? You're wrong, son. Actually, if they're going to strike cities or something like this, EMPs come in, they shut down everything mechanical. In other words, people can't get out. It's to keep the populace there when the strike hits. So, that is the plan with some of the militaries at least. But I don't think EMPs are very likely. And I made that case last week. I think that we have a digital future, like it or not. And I think the powers that be are going to try to enslave us digitally. They're well on the way. For me, at number 9, I would put AI. I would swap out AI with EMPs because AI is very dangerous, and it's going to lead to a lot of bad things. It's going to have its uses. It's very much like when the internet was ushered in. Um, it had uses, but now we see a lot of downside to the internet as well. Number 8, they've got agricultural collapse. I think that's a legitimate one to be on there. Which will lead to food issues globally, but also here in the United States for sure. Number 7, pandemic. I agree with this. I think it should be in the middle of the pack somewhere because I don't believe that the powers that be are done with medical tyranny. I think the pandemic card is going to be played again in our lifetime, and probably sooner rather than later when the fear is still fresh in everybody's mind. But y'all let me know what you think on that. Number 6, they have on this website economic collapse. I think it's much higher than number 6. For me, this is actually number 1, or number 2, but they've got it at 6. This is just, "Hey, bro, we're out of money. The economy just collapsed. What are we gonna do?" Great Depression, red hot. Again, number 1 or number 2 for me. Number 5, earthquakes. Yeah, this was kind of a weird one to see on there because they happen, right? And they're devastating, but they're going to happen in certain regions of the country. I don't know if they're making a reference here to climate change or not, but you know, certain people are going to experience earthquakes. They know that they live in those types of regions. I'm looking at California specifically on this here in the US. Then other places, if you do experience some sort of an earthquake, it's a very minor one, and in many cases, you don't know about it until you hear it on the news. Hey, we had an itty bitty earthquake. So I don't know that I'm putting that at number 5. Number 4, civil unrest. Yes, this is in the right place and everything for me because we're seeing it now. It's going to intensify. Um, Getting back to the presidential election, I think we're going to see civil unrest start to on ramp before the presidential election slash selection in 2024, but especially after the fact. There're going to be a lot of civil unrest. Um, it is what it is. Number 3, wildfires. Yes, these are going to continue. I probably would have swapped these two out, civil unrest and wildfires, but wildfires are going to continue. And I saw, I think it was a meme or whatever, just a few days ago, and it said, you know what? This is probably going to continue to happen because of climate change, and it's going to affect areas that the state wants to buy for pennies on the dollar, like Maui and things. We're going to continue to see them, unfortunately. Number 2, hurricanes. Yes, nothing wrong with preparing for hurricanes. It's like the earthquake deal. If you live in an area or a region that is used to the threat of hurricanes, yeah, you absolutely should be prepared for hurricanes. And this website, number 1, they said flooding. And I'm not sure how I feel about this. I think flooding should probably be on this list because it can be devastating and it is something that affects large pockets of the United States. Um, but at the same time, I don't know if that's the number one thing that I'm prepping for and the number one thing that I'm concerned about here in the United States. We got a lot of other issues. We're getting ready to talk about one actually. But tell me, what would you change on the list? What would you move up and down? What would you swap out? And what would you swap it out with? All right. So getting to something to me that is more ridiculous than flooding, okay? Because you can prepare for flooding. You can have your ducks in a row, so to speak, and be as prepared as possible. You can't really prepare for a dysfunctional government, right? I mean, you can to a degree, but it's not really going to stop. Flooding stops after a while. Dysfunctional government, apparently that never stops. So the government funding deadline is coming up next week, and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, the golden boy, that's sarcasm, people, is now warning of a possible government shutdown. Again, we seem to get these warnings every 6 months or so. You know what I mean? Um, we may have to shut her down if we don't get something worked out. I mean, these people are terrible at their jobs, or they're very good at them if they're installed to destroy the country. You be the judge. So hardline Republicans want massive spending cuts, or at least they claim to want massive spending cuts, because you have to remember, hardline Republicans were put there by voters to do what? Cut spending. That's literally why they are there. So they're pandering to the people that put them there, and they're claiming to want massive spending cuts. Meanwhile, the Biden administration, wants $33 billion more in funding for Ukraine, primarily for weapons and ammunition, which I underline because this is very important. All right. Billions of dollars worth of weapons and ammunition would be bought from retailers and manufacturers here in the United States. That's where the Ukrainians are getting a lot of their ammunition. Very important, because if you think civil unrest, violent civil unrest is on the way, some type of conflict here, civil war, what have you, revolution, and you want to stack ammo, you'd better be stacking ammo, because it may not be available when that time comes. Uh, Again, 33 billion, 8.5 of that is earmarked by the Biden administration for economic assistance for the Ukrainian people. So all but 8.5 billion would be for weapons, rifles, and things, and ammunition. But 8.5 billion for economic assistance for the Ukrainian people. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever been on the toy aisle with a child? Usually my daughter's older, so she goes with her mom to look at clothes. My son, he still wants to look at toys and video games and things. You ever been on the toy aisle and your kid is like, I want this. I want these G.I. Joes, but I want these Masters of the Universe. I'm showing my age. I don't know what the new toys are. And I want this toy, some Thundercats, whatever. And you're sitting back like, son, you got toys all over the place already. You've already spent so much money on toys, it's ridiculous. You know what I mean? I feel like I'm on the toy aisle with Joe Biden. This is why I'm bringing this up, because Joe Biden wants everybody's money, and he wants to spend it here and here and here and here. And it's crazy because, Joe, we've already spent too much as it is. You've already got enough stuff to play with at home. Um, and he made a comment this week when he was addressing the UN. He's talking to the NATO countries and specifically the United States. He said, "We cannot abandon Ukraine." That's a direct quote. I never adopted Ukraine, Joe. Nobody ever called the Ponderosa and said, "Hey, son, are you willing to send tax money to Ukraine, to get us involved in World War III? Are you willing to do that?" Nobody showed up at the door and said, "Hey, are you willing to adopt Ukraine? It become a black hole where you're just dumping tax money and everything's going to go up as a result." It'd have been like that Will Smith thing. I would have smacked this person in the mouth and said, "Keep my tax money's name out your mouth. Please don't do it." Nobody ever called me. Nobody ever showed up or anything like this. Joe Biden, his plan seems to be hurt Americans financially in order to improve the lives of Ukrainians. And this plan to me sucks. If this is not the plan, please explain it to me, because it seems like he's more worried about giving economic assistance to the Ukrainian people than he is the people in Maui, than he is the people in inner cities here in the United States, than he is to the veterans, than he is to the farmers. It's like he's totally abandoned his own people and adopted this new country. And I don't want any part of it. Shut it down. Please, please shut the government down. It doesn't work. The government is so dysfunctional, it does not work. All these people do, these thieves waste money. They steal our money and then they waste it. All right, shut it down. But they probably won't. Let me explain to you probably what's going to happen in the 11th hour. They'll meet in the middle somewhere, right? These hardline Republicans that are there to slash spending will probably approve a bill that gives Joe Biden 20 billion of the 33 or whatever billion that he's asking for. And then both of them will go back to their voter bases and pound their chests and say, look, Republicans will say, well, we stopped them from sending all 33 billion. We only gave him 20 billion. And Joe Biden will go back to his base. God, can you imagine being a part of Joe Biden's voter base? I'm just saying. There ain't many of them, but can you imagine being one of them? and saying, we helped the Ukrainian people this much this month. We're going to ask for more next month. And meanwhile, again, folks here in the United States suffer. It's not going to be defunded. And if so, not for very long, until they throw something together again in the 11th hour and meet somewhere in the middle in a cigar room somewhere. And we're going to suffer. Our cost of living is going to go up because of this. We're borrowing what money we're spending now because, again, we're $33 trillion in debt here in the United States. We are borrowing money right now, not from other countries. They won't loan us any more money. We're borrowing this from our future generations. Your grandkids are going to be paying for the people in Ukraine right now. That's how dysfunctional the US government is. Please shut it down. This is not a threat. This would be something that I would ask Santa for Christmas. Shut it down. We don't need it anymore. And it's one of the many situations that are stacked up like cordwood, SHTF situations. The pile just continues to grow, so to speak. And leading me back to the question, and I'll close here, it's just one of the many, many, many reasons that you should be prepping. So no, a little paranoia is okay. You know, when you can see openly that Americans are being screwed over for the Ukrainian people, when you can openly see a border invasion, people coming up on trains and buses and all kinds of nonsense and boats and things and being allowed to stay, when you see police departments being defunded and nobody answering 911, these are reasons to be prepping. So to that individual and anybody else that's ran into this situation, if you're called paranoid for prepping, it's okay. I've been called worse. I promise you. I would wear it as a badge of honor. Again, don't let this consume your life and be your every waking moment, but please don't stop preparing. Don't stop prepping because a spouse doesn't understand. Okay? Maybe one day if you continue to prep and you continue to explain why when asked, maybe it clicks for the spouse and they get on board and you know, who knows? Anyway, let me know what y'all think in the comments. Y'all take care and God bless.